Welcome to another CLCI Live. Well, as people trickle in, let's remind everybody to please make sure that you join in the conversation. We want to hear from you.
Yes.
So comment. We're monitoring it. And we want to hear from you. Please, please, please. And make sure you subscribe. Show us your support by hitting that subscribe button. It means a lot to us, and that's important. That's all for me, folks. For now, I'm going to be quiet for a moment. Your turn. Take over. Neater.
Yes. Today.
I have an announcement before we start.
Oh. Well, that's too bad, Jen. Well, let's move on. What is your announcement?
My announcement is that I am a credentialed coach.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I know. I should share that with you. It took me about 18 months on my timeline. I felt really good about it, and you guys supported me through the entire process. And God, you guys are amazing. So anyone who's wanting to become credentialed, CLCI has got you the whole way through.
Except the test. We will not do the test.
You have to do that on your own. But you guys, really the lives that we did on the test, I rewatched them multiple times, and the bulk of my studying came from our lives. So
yeah.
Good to hear.
Stuff in them. Definitely a lot of good stuff. What was your, just since you brought that up, quick takeaway about the exam? What would you recommend to others besides, of course, watch our lives?
Mm-hmm. Definitely watch our lives. I think the one where Dan specifically goes through why questions are the worst was the most helpful, because I realized that when you get a question where all the answers are bad, you have to start then making distinctions of how many bad things, according to ICF, are in each question. And so it was almost like I was tallying up, and that's how I would determine what the worst answer was I would say, oh, this one's got 2 bad things. This one has 3 bad things. That's the winner right there. That's the worst.
So tally work.
Yep. So once I got my tallying down, the first 10 questions, I was nervous and I just wasn't really comprehending the questions well in the beginning. But after I simmered down, I was able to find a groove, and I was really confident about that method of tallying up the bad things and finding the worst. Again, finding the best was pretty, I think it stood out more than the worst, but there were some times when I was back and forth. But in the end, I always trusted my gut. Always went, instead of overanalyzing, I went with what my gut told me. And that appeared to be a decent strategy because I passed.
Yay!
All right.
Thank you for sharing.
Everybody get your accreditation level 1 through us, and then, go take the test because we're the best. Moving on. Last week we had some interim lives, but now we're back on the 101 schedule. We're talking scary 101. The October season. We're talking scary 101, toxic positivity.
Yes, we
are. It's possible to be toxic and positive, overly positive, sickeningly optimistic.
So let's just start basic. Let's not even do the toxic part yet.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about just positivity. Are you guys positive people?
Absolutely not. You know this. I am philosophically, I'm a pessimist. I do not ascribe to any sort of positivism or optimism or positivity. I'm not that kind of person. It's not what I do.
How do you get through life, Anthony?
Yeah. You know what? That's a different conversation for different lives. I'm answering Brooke's question, which was, are you guys positive people?
Well, I'm definitely a positive person. Although I can be super negative, I think I would say that I'm a dynamic person, so I can swing to either side of that pendulum very. But for the most part, I tend to strive to stay in the positive realm because that actually feels the best to me. I like to think in that way. I find it to be most useful.
Yep, I agree with Jen. I feel more often than not, you get more benefits from being positive about a situation than pessimistic, and I can say that based on experience because I was a pessimistic guy in between like middle school and high school, just like most young boys are. I was mean and rude to the people around me for no reason, especially the people I cared about. And switching that flip or flipping that switch to positivity just creates much better outcomes for me in my experience.
I know there's times that I get stuck in a negative place, what I'll consider a negative place, but really on the positive side, it's an opportunity for growth. So I tend to do my negative and be in that dance is when I need to. And then when I'm done and I want to be done with it, I tend to get into writing, which helps me move back that pendulum, as you were speaking, to the other side to have it be meaningful in some fashion.
Trick question. You can't be positive people or negative people. You guys are whole people. Oh my God, man, you're
Fair
toxic.
enough.
Every one of you is toxic.
Now you have to answer your own trick question.
Yeah, as if it wasn't a trick question.
I tend to be a very optimistic human being. And even in my pessimism is somehow optimistic. We were talking to somebody about a situation and I was like, they just have to mess up so bad they learn a lesson. Like maybe that's what has to happen is they have to just screw up so bad that they learn from it. And it was pointed out to me, I think Anthony pointed out, he was like, you realize that's an optimistic, because like here I am thinking I'm being a pessimist and I'm bothered. And he's like, you realize that's optimistic? And I was like, what? And he's like, well, you assume that they're going to learn something. Like you assume that even in this moment, they're going to come out of it and have learned a lesson. And that's awfully optimistic. So like, I guess even when I think I'm being pessimistic, I tend to still be trying to see the best in people or think the best or it is kind of who I am. And I think when I was younger, it was almost naively because I was more selfish and I just thought, well, I have all this time and with these people and all of this energy and I've been loving and kind and I was overly so. Like I didn't let myself get in the negative and that was bad, right? And it was so abrasive and shocking to people that when I finally couldn't maintain this pleasant, perfect facade and I was a whole human being and I kind of freaked out, I thought, well, that's not going to damage too badly or anything. But boy, did it. People did not like to see Brooke not doing well. And I learned that that's bad. Like it's better much down the road, I learned it's better to not bring that positive all the time and just be your real person. And then people know what to do with you. If you've been this, and then you're like, people don't know what to do with you. And you're also I've also learned you don't have the deepest relationships with people because they've been sort of based on shallow, artificial feelings. So
based on fake happy stuff, like fake positive. Yeah.
Fake positive. And what do you get? Fake friendships out of that, I learned, right? So now I just, I just put it all out there unabashedly. Just kidding. So we've sort of scratched the surface. I think that toxic positivity is very prevalent in our culture. Jen, you said you had a list.
Yeah, I made a list in the research. I saw a bunch of the same phrases over and over. So I made a list. So the most common toxic positivity statements, everything happens for a reason, which, by the way, who knows if that's true? It's a choice to think that way, right? So
It's a dumb choice to think.
but listen, what I realize is, oh my gosh, if I say that, I'm essentially pushing that onto someone. I mean, that's not an appropriate thing to say, especially if someone just lost someone, you know? That one got me. I was like, ooh, I tend to say that. Look on the bright side. Try not to worry about it or try not to think about it. Try to stay positive. Don't be negative. You'll get over it. You need to get over it. No bad vibes or good vibes only. I am guilty of that one. The silver lining is, or look for the silver lining. You'll get through it. If I did, you can handle it. So relating your experience to their experience, everything will work out in the end. Everything is happening for you. I'm guilty of that one too. Oh gosh, try to see the good in everything. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Oh boy, a blessing in disguise. I'm guilty of all of these, you guys. Be grateful for what you have. It could be worse. Just let it go. Choose happiness. God.
Those are all bumper sticker quotes.
Yeah.
Oh man, I've done so many of those.
Attitude. But
Something grandma posts on Facebook
yeah,
like
I
every day.
I think the big difference is when we're talking about ourselves, right? And it's a platitude, so it doesn't address the work, right? It's a quote that we throw at you, but it doesn't address the work and the reality. And it just sort of applies pressure to people that may not be realistic, right? And that might not be where somebody needs to be met. But I think it's okay. I mean, you can internally look back, hindsight's 2020, and say, hey, that was at the end of it a blessing in disguise. It sucked getting through it. It wasn't easy, but I can see how on the other side of it, I've grown and it's better. And right. I think that that's the difference. And I think that it's okay to look back and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and say, I see, I'm happy with who I am now. So I'm grateful for the experience. But I think what we don't want to do is rush under the rug that it sucked, that it effing sucked at the time, that it was hard, that it was work. And it wasn't easy. And I felt things. And it's really unrealistic to just show then result and not be willing to share there was a process. It's
I think what
It's
you
not fair.
what you said is, you know, when I've come to the other side, I can reflect in those manners. But when I'm in the midst of it and bringing that as a client, bringing that kind of language is not meeting me where I'm at. So as a client, I wouldn't know how, or I would pretend back, you know, that positivity, even though I wasn't feeling it.
But I think this is like a social media culture too, right? A lot of times it's is like and it's something people don't realize. We show a small window of your process, right? You're seeing, and it's been one of the things I love that's sort of going on in Instagram right now is they do these moments where it shows, here's what you see on Instagram, here's the reality of getting there. And I love those. Those are like some of my favorite videos because I'm like, I relate to that. Yes, you know, and I think it's so important to show that there is a struggle, there is a process. It isn't perfect, it isn't, but we want to put our best foot out there. But I connect so much more with people when I see them going through the same struggle as me, you know,
Being authentic.
yeah, right. But I mean, I know I want my social media to be pretty. I want to put out those pretty images. I've got content I'll throw out, I'll hold on to it, but also I do like to show my first times, you know, the process, how I got there. I think that's so very important too. But it's not balanced because a lot of people, you know, they're not gonna. It's a weird struggle in that world, and I think that's why you can't. Everybody has to realize that social media isn't reality.
But what do you think sells more, Do you think toxic positivity sells more or toxic negativity?
Well, I don't think either. I mean, polarizing, probably toxic negativity, because people have an aversion towards negativity, and so I think you can probably scare people into buying things easier than.
I think maybe in the social media sense, I see that.
In a social media sense,
positivity-
yeah, you're seeing
more.
probably a lot of toxic positivity going on there, and I won't say it's all toxic, right? It's just we have to have a secondary level of awareness. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
let's do this. Let's. This isn't 100% real, but it depends on what you're selling too. There's a whole my brain gets into this space.
Let's
where,
talk about life coaching then.
okay, there
in
we
the
go.
life coaching space or the self-help space, we can broaden it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of overlapping, like getting into the woo-woo dimension. Brooke, you sent me that Instagram post, which you tried to trigger me.
I did try to trigger you.
What was it?
Which was the manifestation,
I sent him a post that said, "I just want to see how angry you get."
like the law of attraction, manifestation stuff that you see in a lot of the self-help, new age, spiritual, woo-woo kind of stuff, where like you just have to be positive.
You have to want it enough.
If you
will it
somehow, yeah, you can will it into existence by being so positive that you just positive and good things will happen to you and good things will come. And the corollary to that is if your negative thinking causes negative bad things to happen. So if you are, in a bad situation, maybe you are socio-economically disadvantaged, it's your fault.
because
You're
you're
not
not
thinking
thinking
positive.
positive enough. You're not manifesting your positivity, and that's right. It's very dismissive of the work, right? Because no matter what, there's work. It's not like I can sit here and go, okay, I want a cheeseburger. I'm willing a cheeseburger into my existence right now, right? Like that's not going to work. It would now I want a cheeseburger. Okay, so but I have to.
Working. You're gonna have a cheeseburger later then.
If I want a cheeseburger, I have to get my happy butt to wherever is going to sell a cheeseburger, or I have to hop on DoorDash. I have to have the money to buy one. There's all these steps between me and the cheeseburger. I don't just will it into existence, right? And I think that this toxic positive realm sort of starts to dismiss the reality of there's some effing work involved. Like there's a process. Oh, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
Steve's about to buy your burger just to
happened?
prove me wrong.
Cheeseburger.
And then
But here's the thing: if that kind of language and thought process works for you, then that's appropriate. We're talking about it when you're not in that space and somebody throws that at you. What happens?
Well, I don't even think it has to. I mean, I want to go back to your question. I totally do, but I don't even think it has to be that you're in the space. I think that it's even that manifestation, even that just be positive, even that we're also dismissing our own responsibility, like our own. If I just manifested my cheeseburger into an existence, I didn't have to do anything. I'm not giving myself any credit, right? But so it's almost not fair to just say I manifested it here, because what you're dismissing is you're not even taking credit for your own successes at that point, right? You're just saying, nah, I positive it here. And you're not saying, it's not, for me, it's just like a total dismissal of work, which we should be proud of. And that drives me crazy. And now when we put it on somebody else, we're dismissing them as well, right? Like we're dismissing whatever it is they're experiencing in that moment and the work they have to do.
But I do think there are some people who view manifesting as, okay, thoughts plus feelings plus actions. Like it's not just thoughts. It's not like you just will it into existence. I think it really is a deeper conversation about manifesting maybe one day.
Yes.
I guess so, but then at that point, it becomes indistinguishable from like just doing things. Like it doesn't become this like woo-woo spiritual like essence thing we're talking about, or metaphysical thing. It's just I want something and then I do the things to get the things that I want, which everybody does with the things they want to get. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't have gotten them in the first place. Unless,
Can I just be a jerk for a moment? Like in your same vein as you, Anthony.
Mhm.
Basically what we've done, what you do when you say that, it's work. What we are doing is we're removing that romance, that woo woo, that secret special sauce, that spiritual something, and we're just, if you really break it down, it's a method of focus. Like it's a method of I'm focused on this. This is what I want. Now I'm going to do the work, take the steps, and it does. It's I mean, you can call it and any number of things, right? But ultimately, what we're doing is creating focus around what we want in life. And it's not as romantic as prayer or manifesting or and so. And I'm not saying that it can't be
good vibes
or good vibes for different people, but ultimately that's what those things are. Is it's a matter of we're putting some focus in. But coming back to this top positivity thing, I mean, have you guys ever had an experience that was start to finish nothing but positive?
It was a short one.
My experience working here so far has been nothing.
Oh, don't.
Now.
You didn't never have
Yeah,
anxiety. You've never had stress. You've never had any.
Maybe like a tiny bit of stress, but like minuscule compared to other types
We'll
of
fix that, Jen. Don't.
Yeah.
See, I'm the
Now we
opposite
know.
of Steve. Where like I'm gonna manifest bad things to happen to you now because you said that.
But can we circle? Let's think about what Jen just said. She said compared to other things.
Mhm.
So what does that tell us about?
That's also kind of a trait of toxic positivity, though. That's kind of like when you're eating food and your parents are like, "Well, think of the kids in Africa." And you ought to feel good about your situation now because other people have it worse than you.
But
Or
so, I think
you've had it worse in your past. But go
it's
on.
fair for Jen though to be able to use that as a ruler, right? I think that for Jen to be able to say, I'm happy here and I can be happy here because I know what it is to be in a shittier place, right? And I think that that's an okay thing.
Yes,
Right.
but also I have more tolerance for stress, like way more. Like I'm kind of like a little bit of stress, not a problem. Let's go. I'm not bothered by it the way I used to be. So
I agree with you. And like if Jen was like a client and that brought that up, I wouldn't, that just let that breeze by. Wouldn't, come up as a topic. I think it might be a slippery slope for people who are not as secure emotionally in themselves to like maybe downplay their feelings and maybe not acknowledge stress that is there because they'll tell themselves like somebody who has been in a hard or abusive relationship in the past, well, I should be appreciative of the person I'm with right now even though the things they do are maybe
It's not
wrong
as bad as
or stressful because it's not as bad as what it used to be.
the guy who used to gaslight me and lie and steal stuff.
So it's kind of hard to distinguish from the outside. Like if I was a coach, it's kind of hard to distinguish that from the outside. It might be an internal process where maybe I should be mindful and maybe not default to that line of thinking. Well, it was worse before, so I should just be happy with what I have now and be okay with it.
Because that is kind of like a convincing. Like I'm trying to convince myself. I'm trying to talk myself into being positive. And what is that not doing? That's not
fixing the situation.
Well, what's really going on with you? Okay, I hear you saying that I should be happy. Tell me about that should. Tell me about what emotions are behind that should. What are you feeling in that should right now?
But
You're
for
just-
now, I mean, I'm taking Jen, word, for as truth. I'm just, she's having a great time working with us. Not going to ask too many questions deeper into that. That would have to be on the client to maybe feel that out for themselves. And I'm not exactly sure how I would go about that as a coach, because then I'm putting my own suspicions on the client, maybe my own pessimistic thinking.
So it is kind of a weird space to line to walk, right? If we have a client that is somebody that is repeating toxically positive statements at you, right? Well, I should be happy.
It
I
is
don't
what
want-
it is.
It is what it is. I don't want bad vibes here. I'm trying to just stay positive and focus and keep grinding. At what
I
point is
trust
it?
things will work out.
I'm trusting it will work out.
Mhm.
At what point do we ask around statements like that? I can think of one in the last one. I trust that it will work out. My question would be, well, how can we ensure it does?
That'd be a good one.
Or how can we, leverage our bets in this?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is to ask them, what do they want? What is the pull with this variable X? And what is the growth potential with this variable that you're trying to move within?
As you're sharing that too, I'm thinking here in this piece, like, okay, well, what do I want is of one point, and then we ask, where are you now?
Mm-hmm.
So then we kind of start to get that gauge,
Mm-hmm.
and they can start to think about that. Well, if I hear you saying that, I'm just going to positive think it there. Well, what I'm hearing you say is you want to be positive. Can I ask what you're feeling right now?
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask where you're at right now? And that gives us now this sort of disparity point, right? This is where I am now. This is what I want. Tool, right?
That does tie in.
Mhm.
Sure.
I didn't see, what did it say?
It
It's
says
funny
there,
how we planned that out.
Yeah, no, that was totally on purpose. Happy accident. Is that toxic?
well, I think, even if we were to appreciate Steve's point of view, but I think all of these Facebook Lives feed into each other in just that way. It's a nice little weave if you watch them. I think they're really good information.
Because we're flowing with the world and Anthony, why are you so
Yeah, you
dark?
look like you're in a
What
cave.
happened?
Because I'm not
Anthony's in
positive.
silhouette over here. So I think this is also kind of a thing that we as coaches go into. Let's talk about our people who are becoming coaches. I think a lot of times, like, we have a room full of coaches that are like, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Let's be positive. Let's woo, bam, amazing. And they're in a room and there's all this awesome, amazing, good vibes, support going on. And they want to carry that with them into the world. And then boom, they realize they leave class. There's a lot of work to be done, right? There's a lot of things to be done, lots of stuff going on as a coach, lots of responsibility, lots of that grind. And it's not as idealistic as we would want it to be. And the sad thing for me is out there in the world, there are thousands of coaches that are just presenting it as, oh, it's an easy path to your six-figure, blah, 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 blah. Everywhere you look how successful I am. Look how blah, blah, blah. And they're either selling the work, right? Or they're not openly discussing the work that they had to do.
I want to put one thing in there that you're sharing just off the cuff. The ones that really get me is, don't use social media for blah, 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 blah. And they're on social media. Like,
right? That drives me crazy. That drives me crazy when they're saying, Instagram is dead. Well, why are you advertising on it then? I'm just curious, because obviously you're willing to put money into it. So
yeah,
maybe.
that makes me crazy because they'll say, and they're advertising on it. Anyway, sorry, I had to just say that.
I despise anyone that tells me exactly what I should or shouldn't do. I can't even take people seriously who are like, don't use this, use this. I'm like, no, thank you. Next.
So boom, that was boom for a moment. That's a boom statement. All of the statement. Can you read off 4 statements that you stated before that were toxically positive statements?
Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. Look on the bright side. Try to stay positive. Don't be negative. It's a blessing in disguise.
So there's at least 3 of those that are we get a verb, an active verb, where it's like telling you what to do.
Yes.
Try to stay positive.
Yes.
Look on the bright side.
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember what the other ones were, but what are we doing? We're shooting
Yeah.
people. We're
Be
shooting
grateful. Be grateful. It could be worse. Just let go. Choose happiness. It's all a command.
Why? What if I just don't want to? So I mean, we kind of beat this a dead horse a bit. You know, I think people probably understand the dangers of these statements. So my question for you, and we'll bring this again into the coaching room before we get there, is how do we differentiate, or how do we maneuver through and be optimistic and positive people if that's something we want to be, or we want to, you know, a trait we want to harness? But how do we go about into the world and not be toxically positive? What can we do?
I don't know if all of those statements are necessarily toxic if you're speaking those to yourself. I think they are very overtly toxic if you say that to someone across from you. But if that's something that you internalize and then you do the work, just like we were explaining, around that statement, that's not necessarily toxic to me. I think that's just a step in your process to internalize.
It could be a slippery slope, though, too. Like, it could be a way to not address things that are going on, too.
Yeah, and that's when it becomes toxic, is when things aren't being addressed.
Toxic.
If you're just saying that as a blanket statement and just hoping things happen, then yes,
I think if you're trying to fool yourself, which I think is what you're, Jerome, saying, I'm not in a place where I'm trying to fool myself. I'm living in this purpose. I'm finding my intention, and I'm trying to change my mindset to move in this flow versus what it's been in. I think, is that what you're?
Yeah, definitely. I would say embodying the correct energy based on just what you know helps. Like Jen mentioned, I think we both try and proceed positively, Brooke too, Lisa, and just
no, I never.
I also now know I have to tell myself it's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I know. Self-permission for that.
Yeah, it's okay to be mad in this moment. It's okay to be sad. The way I'm feeling is okay. My emotion right now is okay. I do not have to apologize for it. I cannot tell you how many times in my life I have had a woman or a man or anybody apologize to me for crying. And it breaks my heart that we as a people feel like we have to apologize for crying. Like, we should be able to just cry and be like, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is just another human emotion, and I'm allowed to cry. And it's okay. And I don't have to feel guilty or shameful or bad or like I shouldn't be crying. And there's such it's built into us. It's built into everybody. It's so common. It's silly. I think almost every single time I have seen, and I more recently it's been women, but definitely men too, cry. It's 90% of the time followed by an apology, like 90% of the time. And I think that is a result of toxic positivity, of this feeling like we have to be happy and we're not allowed to feel sad and express emotion.
Expressing emotion to me is what it seems like. You know, it's not, I don't know. I mean, depending on where I am, I'm part of this group of people where I sometimes question, is emotion appropriate here? You know, or am I going to be a problem if all of a sudden I start getting real worked up, you know?
Well, and I think that there's a weird balance between emotional intelligence, right? And being able to, I say this with, I say this with caution. But I know we do that. Like, there's an appropriate place and a time to express emotion in certain ways. But I think when it comes to things like sadness, we shouldn't We should just allow that, right? It's not. I think when you're pushing your emotions onto somebody else. So when you're angry and yelling and handling it in a way that isn't healthy or productive, that's sort of where that line starts to we're starting to go over the line. And I don't know what that line is, but shedding tears, I feel like shouldn't be, even and being upset, being a little frustrated. We should be allowed to sit and express and say, I'm frustrated. It's indicating something, right? It's telling us this is a tool and we should acknowledge it. Do we want to act in those moments? Probably not always, right? We want to let that emotion process it and then come out of it and make probably more smart and level-headed decisions. But that doesn't mean that we should feel bad for having felt what we feel.
Well, I think that's what we're talking about, is providing a support system. Whether you're going to your coach or you're going to some sort of psychological help, or you're going to your best friend to share these feelings that you're experiencing. At times, though, it might be that you were bringing up, I think, sometimes you don't feel safe in that environment, that when you do start expressing in some fashion, the I'm sorry's might be a place where I'm not quite ready to involve that other person in that space where I'm willing to be vulnerable with them with that intensity.
Sayonara, that is totally a true statement. And I'll give you a whole, but I'm going to stay out of it. I have a whole sociological overview as to why anger is more readily received than sadness. But anger is fear's bodyguard, and ultimately sadness is an expression, I think, a real, an emotion that is more palatable, more internalized, and anger is and I think sometimes anger can be seen as a show of force, and sadness is seen as a show of weakness. And sadly, in our culture, we tend to embrace that show of force and strength over the tears, which are seen as a show of weakness, which truthfully, it should be neither. And honestly, I think it's inverted. I think that anger is a show of weakness and sadness is a show of strength. So, but that's just the way our culture is, which is interesting. One of the questions we ask our students in class, I think, is very telling in this toxic positivity space, and that's I don't know if we pose it as a question, like a multiple choice question or what have you, but it's what do you do if your client is crying?
Mm-hmm.
Be happy.
And so if we give you a list of options, do we offer them a Kleenex? Do we
Don't cry? It's okay. Everything's
Stop crying! Stop it!
Do we say, I'm so sorry? Do we ask them if they're okay? Do
No.
we
We
what do
zip
we
it.
do?
We sit and stay
Hold
present.
the space.
Hold that space.
Hold the space.
What do
The
these
coach-
tears do for you? How do they serve you?
The coach has to be comfortable with emotion being present in the room, or they got some work to do on their own.
What's
right?
the harm? But I've asked this out to family members and other people. Well, what's wrong with handing them a Kleenex?
It's kind of a body language that, okay, we're ready for you to stop. Here, clean yourself up.
Yeah, I would say it's a body language too of oh, poor thing. Here's a tissue.
Enough of that. You're gross. I don't.
It just what's interesting is Lisa and I said different things. So think about all the different ways someone could translate that. You know what I mean? You don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah. And what's wrong with saying I'm sorry?
Why are you apologizing?
Yeah,
What are you saying
sorry.
sorry for?
Sorry.
I'm sorry you're upset.
I'm
Are
sorry
you okay?
you feel.
It takes me out of the moment.
May not be asking for your sympathy at that moment at all.
Or what about asking him, are you okay?
Again, it stops me. If I'm the client who's crying, it stops me from processing what's going on. So in stopping, I don't get to finish.
Mm-hmm.
with this person I thought was safe for me. So I might not bring it up again. I might not remember to bring it up with you because it was halted. I didn't get to go into flow with it.
And
What
asking if they're okay insinuates that they're not okay if they're showing emotion. So that question in itself, I mean, it
It's
shows
denial.
that coach is uncomfortable with the emotion present.
So what if you have a client that just laughing their butt off?
Are you okay?
I would ask, what's going on? What's happening for you?
Did you have nitrous oxide? But do you feel uncomfortable if somebody's laughing? I mean, if they said something funny and started laughing, would we feel?
And I probably will laugh with them.
Yeah.
That probably I can't even help, which goes with the you as a coach might start crying in your session because someone else is crying, which is also
we have to learn to tamper that. Yeah,
but Steve asks, would a question of the effect, "What do you need from me?" be more appropriate?
That's a good question, Steve.
What do you
Silence
need from me as a coach?
in those given moments, silence is always going to be best. Not even that statement, which can be an empathetic statement. It's wait. Be
Well,
present.
at some point, the silence does have to end. Otherwise, there's no more coaching session. But
typically allow
that could
the
be
client,
one of a, yeah.
allow the client to break that silence.
It's not going to go for that long. I mean, unless the client is severely impacted on that particular
45 minutes of crying.
and that might be
Great session.
a therapy thing. But as far as coaching, they know we're sitting there. They know we're present. We are right there with them. They're not going to keep going on for 45 minutes.
So now let's talk about this because I've had this happen in one of my sessions, and I had a moment where I was unsure how to address it, and I knew what I wanted to express to my client, but I was like, am I crossing a coaching line by saying this? I had a client cry, and not only cry, she did a couple things. She didn't want to talk about why she was crying, but she wanted to talk through what she was crying. Like she was like, I don't want to be coached on this, but tears. And then at the end of it, she had a statement where she was like, I'm sorry for crying. And then she said, I'm so sorry. And you must think I'm crazy, right? You must think I'm crazy and I'm so sorry for crying. And in that moment, I wanted to say to her, this is a judgment-free space. And I think I did say that to her to some effect. Like, I am not here to pass judgment on you. I have no honest opinion about what it is you are feeling or experiencing and sharing with me. That's not why I'm here. This is for you. And if this is a judgment-free zone. And I'm happy to be here to listen and hold space for you in any way that you require me to do so. But I had a question. I mean, at that point, I'm talking a lot as a coach, right? And I'm not asking her questions. I'm sharing that she is safe. Am I crossing a coaching line by making those statements or reminding her of those statements? I mean, I was genuinely
No, because the topic of conversation at that time is about the crying and about the emotive expression where she says, I'm sorry that happened. You must think I'm crazy. I might, as a coach, even clap back a little bit. I might say, I mustn't feel either anyway about it. Like, it's not my job to feel or make assumptions about you crying in the session. If you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. But and then we can go into what you said, because you're talking about the container of the coaching session, what is and isn't appropriate behavior, which in this case, crying is, she's allowed to feel that
is
way.
inappropriate. Positive, good vibes only here in this coaching session. And then I did say to her, if ever, that is something you want to talk about or talk through, you can always bring it back up. We can always go back there. And I gave her just a gentle reminder of that.
What was it about?
I'm not going to say. I also
It's a
honored.
trick question. It's a trick question.
I also honored her need, or that she didn't want to discuss it at that, but and I honored that as well. In the back of my head, I was like, I bet that comes up again at some point. Made a little mental note, but
Mhm.
And I think it did in other ways, and I did kind of call back to it if I remember correctly. But it's just an interesting space to be in when you have a client that is apologizing for their emotions, and part of me so much wants to just hug those people and be like, nah, you're good. This is like,
That's your toxic positivity coming
Right.
through.
well, I just meant like, nah, you're good. Like, this is the safest place for you to be able to express those emotions. Like, I want this to be a place where you
But-
can feel anything you feel freely.
I'm mostly referring to maybe the overwhelming urge for a coach to want to reassure and comfort and be
Yeah.
not the cheerleader, but maybe like the safety blanket for their client, which
I
is
call it the
another form of
rescuer.
yeah.
I can imagine a coach saying it's all going to be okay. I
Yeah.
remember early on when I was having a harder time, Lisa and I would text back and forth, and she would never tell me it was all going to be okay. And it was such a powerful thing that she would never say that. She's like, she would even address it. She would say, I can't tell you that it's going to be okay. Like, I can't say that to you, or give you that reassurance. And, you want to hear it, right? When you're having a tough time, it's all going to be okay. But I thought it was such a cool and honest, exchange for her to tell me, I can't tell you it's going to all be okay. What I can do is ask you what you need in this
Mhm.
moment.
Mhm.
And what you can do and what it needs to happen. And that was, now that I look back on it, Lisa's coaching me a little bit, right?
What you just said, Brooke, what do you need in this moment? Going back to Steve's question, is it appropriate to ask, what do you need from me? To me, that makes it coach centered. And when you ask, what do you need in this moment, it keeps it in the client's grasp. Like, even to say, what do you need? Sometimes I would even turn it even further inward and ask, what do you need from yourself? Almost as like permission to give yourself what you're holding back. But I do love, what do you need in this moment? I wouldn't turn it towards me, the coach, because I personally don't think my clients need me. I think they need themselves.
That's an interesting thing too, and I think it still sort of dovetails into this space of this toxic positivity, and it's this sort of credit thing that happens when we coach, and how our clients love to give us credit for their successes. Like, I couldn't have done this without you. I couldn't have.
Yeah, let's talk about that. That's a tricky one for me. I still feel like I'm learning.
Because I want to be like, yes, you could have. You absolutely could have.
But also when you write your review of me, put that in there. Put that
Yeah. Yeah. The review is different than what.
like it's all the client, but also make sure that you cite that it was me.
No, but if a client says that to you, what do you say to them? My first thought is to say, is that true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who did the
Let's
work?
talk about that. Could you really have done this without, or not have done this without me?
Who
Truthfully.
did
Yeah.
the work?
Who did the work, right? Yeah. Who did the work?
It's not my work.
Mm-hmm. All I did was ask questions.
Typically, what I'll say
Well,
is,
you
all
were here and you
facilitate.
asked me those questions, and then I'm honored that you gave me that space, but I still did not do
Yeah.
the work. That's all I
You
did.
did the work. You did the work. I facilitated. That's what happens when you partner with someone in that way. That's what the collaboration is in coaching.
But also, I'm the best coach in the world, and please tell people that.
I like how he goes to the side to do that. The truth is known. We really just want your review.
Feel free to put that in the reviews. And that is a funny space, right? That is kind of another weird space where we're like, yeah, no, please give me all the credit in the review.
Yeah.
But we really
I need
truly
people to
do.
believe that is true before coming in, and then they get to discover that it was really the true power was inside them the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's takes us back to this toxic positivity and the fact that it doesn't address the work.
Mm-hmm.
So even on the flip end of that, you're giving me all the credit. Well, what have you just done? You have dismissed all of the work you just did, right?
Mhm.
And this is you. And it's the same thing when we're like, Nah, I just stayed positive. Yeah. No, I just, it was just positive vibes. I kept the grind. I just
It's
kept
also
going and
like
pushed through.
positive or toxic gratitude. Like it was nothing to do with me. It was all like the people helping me and supporting me and yada yada. No, you did it. You were the one who did
I
it.
know there's one thing in coaching that coaches have a difficult time with is letting their clients leave in an uncomfortable space.
Mhm.
They want to make it better before they go. Yeah.
Let me rescue you. Let me fix it for you. Let me give you advice that's going to help you on the flip side. And frankly, that's not your business nor your job, right? That's part of where they are in their process. In that discomfort, they could be learning a lot.
Mhm.
I'm grateful for some of my headstrong clients that like have come in and been like, nah, this is how I feel. No, you're not going to change it. It's not going to make it better. I'm good with how I feel right now. This is how I want to feel. And I'm like, okay. You know what I mean? Where I've been that person that's been like, okay, where are you scaled 1 to 10? How do we get that 6 to a 10? And then to have a client slap me back with, no, all I want is a 6 to be at a 6. Oh, awesome. Okay, that's what we're saying, right? But it was like that was a lesson for me in that moment that sometimes we don't need to go up that gauge if that's not what they want and not what they're ready for, and they're that what they want to be is at that 6 for and I understood why. I mean, I did ask around, tell me about that. Hey, are you cool with this? Are we comfortable? Let's go. I didn't say cool and comfortable. It was how do you feel? I left it open ended and I didn't feed them, but you know what I mean. That interesting thing about the gratitude, it kind of was a thing for me because I have I love giving credit to the team, right? I always want my team to get the credit. Like, you guys did awesome. This is about you. This is about the work. This is
But then I put this on my resume though. It was
ingrained in me as a boss, as a leader, as somebody is like, I would rather everybody else have the credit for their work, right? But ultimately, I guess that's maybe that makes me look good, right? Too. So it all works, and it's maybe the same way with the clients, right? If my team's doing awesome, I must be doing something right. If your clients are doing awesome, you must be doing something right. And that's all you need, right? That's all you need. You don't need the credit.
That takes us back to balance 101.
And if your client's not doing awesome, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay too.
Yep.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll come in and not do okay. And that's okay. So, final thoughts. We have a few minutes left. Y'all.
I have a final thought. So I realized that for me, when I read that list of stuff, and then Jerome talked about how sometimes, like, for him, those things are true for him and those things feel good, and it doesn't, seem like toxic positivity because, that actually is real for him. And I was thinking about it for me, the distinction is force. I always check in with myself and try to figure out, does this feel forced to think this way right now? And if it does, I pull back on it. But there are some times when everything is happening for me actually feels really good and I'll just flow with it. So I just wanted to share that my distinction on toxic positivity is force, is identifying, does it feel forced? If it flows, I am going to be positive. If it's forced, I'm going to check in and maybe look at my options and just sit with it.
And that's the balance part. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. I wanted to talk about this. I know I bring up balance like every show. I feel like for the last 3 that we've done. I put it here in the captions. I wanted to talk about it. I mean, it's tatted on my shoulder, so I really believe it. Like, balance is something that I try and embody. And I 100% agree with you, Jen. It's not always, the case where I feel like you should internalize some of those statements that you said. They're not always going to work for you, and they shouldn't be something for you to lean on. But in a moment where you are feeling good, I think it is something that is okay. I do think that they are dangerous to just kind of spill out to other people and to ask them to take as advice. That's not necessary. Nobody knows themselves better than they do themselves. So if you can get to that point yourself, that's okay. But again, it's that balance part that I think creates that foundation for you to make a good decision for yourself.
As we're sharing too, it's funny because like I can suffer from racing thoughts at nights on occasion, and it's like I usually lose sleep, and I'll do a couple things. I'll either like find a way to drug myself to sleep, just ignore it, and then address it in the morning. But there are times I cannot do that, right? And so I know I have to be up early, and there's no sleeping in, so I just can't. Just have to process it. And I've tried it's going to be okay, let it go, do the deep breaths. I've tried all these things, but it doesn't work for me. What works for me is when I actually like write it out or start to take action and figure out what my plan of action is going to be. And that really is the only way that I can actually know that it's going to be okay. Because I can tell myself all day it's going to be okay, but the only way I can really get to the other side of that, it's not even doing the work for me, it's just seeing the steps for it to be okay, and knowing what they are, and knowing what, and then that's when I can actually start to believe that it's going to be okay. And sometimes we have to just be okay with not being okay, and allow that to sit, and then eventually it gets a little easier and we start to see the path, and that it starts to clarify. But there are times when it's just so foggy and crazy that we can't even see the path to okay, and that's okay, right? I think it's a big sign in that moment to just take a beat, take care of yourself, start to try to recenter whatever that might be, and feel what you're feeling, so that you can start to see the path to okay, whatever that might look like. So
part of my thoughts were toxic positivity. It's not about giving a spoonful of sugar to make it positive.
Although a spoonful of sugar is really delicious.
The idea is we can't give that. But on the flip side of that, us as coaches, we need to be working with our own stuff so that we are not foistering it on our clients and what we think our clients need, should be happening, should be behaving. So that self-work, I think, is always a very important step in all of this.
Yeah, because if you can't cry, feel comfortable when you cry, or feel sad, how are you going to hold a space for somebody else who's crying and feeling sad?
That's a really good point. That's a good question to ask yourself. Yeah.
Anthony?
Final thoughts that kind of tailed off of Jen and Jerome's thoughts is that probably one of the best indicators of toxic positivity, this doesn't mean that it is always the case, but the best indicator is, are you being positive as a means to an end? Are you trying to achieve something, some goal? Are you trying to make other people happy? Are you trying to make yourself feel better? Are you trying to not be a bother? Whatever it is, if you're using positivity as a means to an end, it might, end up being toxically positive. Whereas if you're just
That's
positive,
manipulation.
whereas if you're just positive because you're a happy person and that's just your general disposition in life, then check in, make sure positivity is what other people need, rather than just how you feel. That's it. That wraps up Scary 101, Toxic Positivity. Next week, we don't know what we're talking about, or do we, Brooke? Do you have a scary...
It'll be scary.
Scary 101, something or another.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I want to take it yet, so we will circle back, but just know we'll be back in the scary 101 realm. I haven't had a chance. Well, I could probably have, but I just have not reviewed the direction I want to take this. There's so many options and possibilities here, so
You gotta make it like more Halloween.
I want to make good choices. Next, or I should say productive choices. The best. Oh man, all of these are bad. I want to make choices. So yes, I think as we approach the Halloween, it'll get spookier, scarier, and more. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe. If you know anybody else also who might find this informative, helpful, anything of that nature, please share it with them. We would love for you to share our content with others. And what
Also, we have an amazing education process training. Be sure to join us if you haven't.
Yes.
Jen's got her ACC from it.
Woot woot! Certified Life Coach Institute. I think we do certify coaches in 3 days, but we also have a full-blown more process than the 3 days. It's not just 3 days. There's a lot more to us.
Oh, yeah.
than that, so
Totally a lot.
all righty, that's all. Thank you guys. See you next week, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We will be here. Hope to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sai.